Some have more than they need. Some have more than they deserve. We'd just like a few more. If you haven't done so already, would you mind clicking on the subscribe button above this video to subscribe to the Bible Skeptic's YouTube channel? And if you're already a subscriber, let us take this moment to say thank you. Thank you!
Ignore the physics of scale. Evidence of the ancient biblical Nephilim doesn't exist because it's been covered up.
It's a giant conspiracy.
While not addressing it specifically, but clearly in response, NephilimFree has posted a video on the heels of my Giants of the Bible series, in which he argues that archaeological and fossil evidence for ancient human giants exists, but has been covered up by such evil scientific institutions as the National Geographic and the Smithsonian.
Lots of giant men have been dug up out of this earth then, but seems like every time that happens, the Smithsonian Institute or National Geographic Society has representatives that pop on the scene and either buy or borrow, and they're never seen again, these evidence, these remains of giant human beings.
But why a cover-up?
But you see, they'll try everything to discredit anything that has anything to do with the Bible. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's in the Bible, they've got to refute it. That's why they once said Hittites never existed, and then, you know, the Hittite culture was found with archaeology, and, you know, they're like, you know, that's happened many times. They said the same thing about King David. Oh, King David was mythological, a king. He never existed. Yeah, sure. Then they found, you know, an inscription of the house of David on, you know, on the stone, which speaks of the kingdom of David. And same thing happened with Pontius Pilate. The atheist said, oh, Pontius Pilate and Jesus Christ both are a fallacy. Then they find all kinds of archaeological evidence for Pontius Pilate, his name inscribed in stone.
Hold on there, Nepho. Which is it? Are discoveries which lend evidence to the reliability of the biblical narratives, like the remains of human giants, covered up by evil secular institutions like the Smithsonian and the National Geographic, which send representatives to buy, borrow, or steal away the evidence so that it's never seen again? Or are they left to embarrass the skeptics, like evidence of the once mythical Hittites, the kingdom of David, or the person of Pontius Pilate? You can't have it both ways, I'm afraid. Either there is a massive conspiracy among the evil atheist scientists to discredit the Bible by hiding any evidence that corroborates biblical tales, or there is not, and occasional remains, like those of the Hittites or David's kingdom, are uncovered which support some of the Bible's historical claims. Seems to me like you're a man who doesn't know what he's trying to argue. Never seen a guy rope-a-dope himself before.
Welcome, Willie Bob.
But tell me, what proof do you think you have that evidence for biblical giants has been covered up by the evil scientific community?
I sent an email off, because I had done some research, I sent an email off to a museum which had at one time housed some of these giants found in Native America. And I sent an email asking them why, since their museum had these fossils at one time, where are they now? And can a photograph be found of them? Can they provide me with any kind of a photograph of them?
Neff, I'm sorry. I need to interrupt and ask, what gave you the idea that this museum ever had giant Nephilim bones? But, of course, you don't say.
And this is the email I got. This email went to Eugene M. Hatton, Ph.D., Curator of Anthropology, Nevada State Museum, Carson City, Nevada. And this was the response I got. I went by the name Matthew. Dear Matthew, the Nevada Historical Society in Reno supposedly had a human skeleton from a population of mythical, and he calls them mythical already. You see how he's trying to discredit. Red-headed giant cannibals, the Si-Te-Cahs. The skeleton was loaned for display at the St. Louis World's Fair and was never returned, or so the story goes. I don't know if any photographs or documentary evidence of this skeleton exists. It is an oral tradition. Now wait a minute. Wait a minute. Lots of holes here. The local Native American tribes have legends of giants on the fringes of their territories. The best known stories of those are the northern Paiutes. If anything related text from the Native American, I'm attaching related text from our Native American exhibit. We do not have, he didn't. We do not have human remains in our collections, but none of them are giants. We do have, but none are giants. There is both skeletal and archaeological evidence of another prehistoric culture occupying the same area prior to and contemporary with the northern Paiutes. These other people may have been the Si-Te-Cahs, although they were not giants. Sincerely, Gene Hackman. Okay. Now listen, let's go through this email of his real quick and see the hegemony that you'll find in Eugene M. Hatton, Ph.D., curator of anthropology. His email. Okay. He says, purportedly had a human skeleton from a population of mythical red-headed giants, cannibals. The skeleton was loaned for display and never returned, blah, blah, blah. So the story goes. No documentary evidence. It's an oral tradition. See how he's trying. It's fake. Never happened. We never had it. Didn't exist. Shut up, go away. Forget about it. It was a lie. Somebody told you a lie. Never happened. It's a lie. Don't believe it.
Well, what did you think he was going to do, Neff? Blow the cover off the evil science conspiracy? Because that's the only reason you think the museum wouldn't have these giant bones, isn't it? Can't be because these oversized people were really a myth, like Zeus, Apollo, or Athena, right? Or maybe Zeus, Apollo, and Athena were real too. According to your theory, scientists call things myths in order to discredit religious assertions. You twit. The reason Dr. Hattori said the giants are mythical and that there's some urban oral legend about the museum once having had fossil remains of supposedly giant humans is because there never were any such fossils, and the story is a lie. Just like the lie about the alien spaceship at Roswell and the lie about ruins from Atlantis being off the coast of Bimini. But I'm really enjoying watching you get yourself all worked up about this whole conspiracy theory of yours. You're the only guy I know who can get so excited about the lack of evidence being evidence for some weird religious fantasy. You go, girl.
And then he goes on to say that that it's legend, and that they have anthropological evidence in their museum, but it's not giants, none of it's giants. Now here's my questions to Mr. Hatton.
Questions for Dr. Hattori. Didn't you already ask him your questions? You did, but you didn't like the answer he gave you. What you did isn't called research, Neff. It's called a farce, since you had no intention of using what you learned to expand your knowledge. Whatever Dr. Hattori wrote to you, you were going to use to support your preconceived conclusions regarding these giant cannibalistic Indians. If he confirmed your story with documentation or photographs, you would have used that to support your assertion regarding the truth of the Bible. If, however, he sent you what he did, a letter explaining that the museum didn't have any of these so-called giant bones and the tall tale regarding their loan to the St. Louis World's Fair, you were going to use that to your advantage as well, by claiming the lack of documentation and photographs is itself proof of these giants and of an evil scientific conspiracy and cover-up. You're not interested in the truth, Neff. You're only interested in living in your warped view of reality.
Now here's my questions to Mr. Hatton. Any museum which has evidence in anthropology, skeletons of any kind, they make a record of it, you see, for insurance purposes. They have to insure it, because if their museum burnt to the ground, they could lose millions and millions of dollars worth of artifacts and not be recoverable. When something is checked into a museum, photographs are made of it, it's measured, drawings are sometimes made, it's cataloged, records are made, physical, they're typed up, printed on cards, and they're put away in file cabinets. They have plenty of evidence that they have this artifact. They record this for insurance purposes, and so that they can easily find it if it's in a drawer in a cabinet somewhere. Okay. So he's claiming that they once had it, and now they don't even have a record of it. There's no paper trail.
If the museum would have documented the arrival of these Nephilim bones, why do no such documents exist? Could it be that there are no documents because there were never any bones at the museum? Ever stop to think about that, genius?
Loaned and never returned.
Dr. Hattori never said the fossil Nephilim bones were, in fact, loaned, Neph. He said there's a story floating around that such a thing happened, but it never did. It's a tall tale. Listen to the letter again, read in your own annoying voice.
The skeleton was loaned for display at the St. Louis World's Fair and was never returned, or so the story goes. I don't know if any photographs or documentary evidence of this skeleton exists. It is an oral tradition, or so the story goes. It is an oral tradition, or so the story goes. The story goes. The story goes. The story, 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 the story.
You see, Neph? The loan of the fossils to the World's Fair is a story. It's not documented. It didn't happen. There are no photographs of the Nephilim bones for insurance or any other reason, because there never were any Nephilim bones. It's a tall tale, a fabrication, a yarn.
Story.
Besides, giant bones from Native Americans would no more confirm the biblical story of the Nephilim and the reality of God and his heavenly host than did the discovery of the so-called hobbits of Flores confirm what J.R.R. Tolkien wrote regarding a Middle Earth with a Frodo Baggins, a Samwise Gamgee, and a Peregrine Took, unless you believe the evil scientific community is covering up the fossilized bones of orcs and the petrified remains of Ents. I wouldn't put it past you. And there's another thing that distinguishes science from religious fantasy. Science isn't afraid of the truth. The truth is, there was once a community of diminutive hominids which lived in the forested area of a small island in Indonesia. The discovery has raised a number of mysteries and has called into question once held scientific ideas. But that is not a threat to science. In fact, it's invigorating. Regardless of what the discovery of the remains of human giants might mean to the biblically paranoid and deluded like yourself, such a discovery would be welcomed by the scientific community because, you see, science is concerned with answering as accurately as possible questions about the world we live in. It is not interested in protecting a cherished belief the way religious apologists and creationists are. Are you starting to catch on now, Nephi?
But now he says they don't have any record of it.
No, dillweed. Not now they don't have any record of the giant bones or the loan to the World's Fair. They never did. It's, what was that word again?
Story. This is the kind of hegemony that you'll hear from every evolutionist scientist in the world. Oh, it never existed. Well, we don't know. Oh yeah, I see the paperwork for that one, but you know that it never existed. So it was a mistake, clerical mistake. Or in this case, there is no paper trail. See, as if a museum is going to accept anthropological evidence of anything, a mouse, and not photograph it, not catalog it, not measure it, and not put it away for safekeeping.
Exactly, Neph. So since your inquiry to Dr. Hattori regarding these Nephilim bones didn't turn anything up, that's evidence for anyone using rational thinking to conclude that no such bones ever existed, were never delivered to the museum, and were never sent on loan to the St. Louis World's Fair. The museum wouldn't employ some blithering idiot who would say,
"Oh, we don't keep records of nothing we got. Why would we keep records and paperwork on anything? We just throw it all in a box and forget about it."
This is the kind of hegemony that has people brainwashed around the world into believing in evolution. Because if they can get their hands on it, every evolutionist scientist in the world will bury hide for good, burn, destroy, bake, cook, throw away, toss, shoot to the moon, whatever evidence that supports anything in the Bible that they can. It will disappear forever. Evolution is lies, made knowingly in many cases.
But we have evidence of just the opposite of what you're claiming, Neph. Discoveries which alter the scientific status quo happen all the time. The aforementioned hobbits of Flores are an excellent example. Recently, discoveries of dinosaurs which once lived near the Arctic Circle have caused paleontologists and paleobiologists to rethink dinosaur anatomy. And you yourself mention archaeological discoveries which confirm some of the historical claims of the Bible. Far from covering up such finds, these discoveries can skyrocket careers. Everyone wants to be the next Charles Darwin, the next Howard Carter, or Heinrich Schliemann. You lose, Neph, as you and your deluded kind always do. You lose. There's no cover-up. Satan is not controlling the scientific community in order to destroy the Bible. The only conspiracy is the one you hatched inside your own head.
If you believe what you're told about evolution, you're believing people who package lies and disseminate them as the truth, and who work as hard as they possibly can, whittle their little fingers to the bone, to try to discredit anything that is mentioned in the Bible. Anything. This has happened to many human fossils of giant men found in North America. There have been, at least from my research, one of a great Christian lady here on YouTube named Karen's Faith. Karen has done a lot of research in this area too, and has found that there are probably at least a dozen or 24 known fossil giants, giant men, at the minimum height, which is 8 feet, and some as high as 16 feet tall, have been recovered from North America alone.
Karen's Faith, huh? She's your source for all this talk of scientific conspiracy? Well, there's two peas in a pod. She's got just as much unsupported paranoid assertions as you do, Neph. Hell, anyone can write paragraphs that accuse others of conspiracy, but the burden of proof is on those making the claims. An absence of evidence is not evidence of a conspiracy. That's just paranoid delusion. But you're just full of that and a few other things, aren't you, Nephi boy? If you and Karen need to invent a conspiracy in order to support your outlandish ideas, get new ideas. By the way, were you aware that Karen pretty much copied word for word an article from some new age rag called Nexus, titled Archaeological Cover-Ups by David Hatcher Childress, published sometime in the early 1990s for her video? What now, Neph? You also believe in Atlantis, pyramid power, and channeling unseen entities?
None of them are in existence to this day. All we have is accounts, a couple of photographs, newspaper clippings from the time when it was viewed by the public, and that they are gone now.
But all this talk about missing remains of giants really does boil down to a delusion, because the laws of physics and the limitations of biology are proof alone that giant humans never existed. Funny how you don't ever look into these limiting factors when discussing your biblical giants, Neph. It's so much easier to claim that remains of these oversized people have been uncovered, but deliberately lost by evil, anti-biblical conspirators. That way, you don't have to deal with reality. You really should look into taking some sort of medication. It's always sad when we lose someone to superstition. Won't you please consider a generous donation today to any of your favorite skeptical or rational charities? They all do such great work to bring reason to a world hurting from blind belief. Please be generous, because a brain is a terrible thing to waste.